the what we call the itua, the deaths and misfortunes that have come to people of Hawke's Bay, in particular. The various Māori around are grieving with their loved ones, and indeed some of our very well-known other friends and people that we associate with. So we acknowledge their passing and hope the good Lord looks after them, going to a place where we will all meet one day. And on the good news, I'd just like to acknowledge that the leader of Niki has been, as you know, re-elected, and we rejoice in that. And down our end, JB has been retained as our delegate for Tamatea. So kia ora no tātou.
Thank you, Mike, and I think thanks for acknowledging the death of the young lady in Porongahau. And Porongahau has had 3 suicides in the recent time. We've had another one in Amahu. It's, as a society, we need to take a really good look at ourselves. The amount of our youth that, and not only our youth, but some of our people in industry and business and farming who are committing suicide. We're doing something not as well as we should be, so thanks for acknowledging it, Mike. Really appreciate that. And we're thinking of the families. So to get on with our meeting, we have an apology one from Fenton, who had to step out to a TV meeting, and he'll be here in half an hour. And I think it actually is important that we are represented at those meetings, so he's done that for us. Are there any other apologies? The apologies, do we have someone to move the apologies? Councillor Barker?
Aye.
Aye. All those in favour? Aye. Any notices? If there are any notices, we will move to...
Well, could I just make one point? I'd like to note the decision of Debbie Hewitt, announced in the paper, and to say, no doubt, have an opportunity to say a more formal, fulsome thank you to Debbie for her services. I want to acknowledge Debbie's contribution to this council and say that she's been a fearless advocate for her Central Hawke's Bay people, and she's done a sterling job for them, as to be acknowledged, and I thank her for her services.
Thank you, Rick. Yeah, and ditto, Debbie. Conflict of interest declarations? There are none. Confirmation of minutes of the last meeting. You have that before you. 4 corrections. Are there any corrections? Therefore, do we have someone to move the minutes?
I'll move.
We'll move up. Seconder? Peter?
I can't, I wasn't there.
Are you in there? Paul? We have a seconder. All those in favour?
Aye.
We confirm
Pass with
those.
acclamation.
We confirm those minutes. So follow up from previous regional council meetings.
Does this include the Laguema?
Yes, it does.
Yes, yeah, I've got
So we'll take these all as read and take questions.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I could comment on public transport focused workshop. I've had a chat with Anne this morning, and we've set some tentative dates for hearing the submission on the public transport plan, and then scheduling this workshop at a slightly later date, but in advance of adoption of the passenger transport plan. So those dates appeared not to clash with anything. They'll be going to Leanne and circulated for your information.
Yeah. Just before we go, I've got a couple of things. So on the Inertia Bradley one, is there scuttlebuck around point 2?
So that relates to our senior coastal scientist, Anna Murray-Smith's husband. Shade Smith is he's an ecological, marine ecological consultant that does work for PAMPAC. So
He's in the iwi too.
yes. But he has done work.
Okay.
He has been an advisor to PAMPAC, and of course, Anna is a member of our science team as
Okay,
well.
so you're covering that. The other one was from Catherine. How does is that public, our investment? Is that publicised where we're invested?
It will have been in the report on our investments, I think. The last one.
They're
came through.
itemised.
Yeah, had the list of the different shareholdings held by our funds.
Okay. And the other one from Greenpeace, is that the one you're going to talk about too, Tom? Is it?
No, I have a different one.
I personally be happy to supply this information from my own perspective. I don't know about other councillors, but if it makes them happy.
So Chair, the request was to the council, and obviously it's not information that we hold,
Yeah,
but
that's right.
if the request went to you and was related to your public role, then and it's information you hold, and then it may be captured by Lagoima, but I guess welcome any councillor that wants to, of their own volition, to contact Greenpeace and provide that information.
Is that just answers it?
We don't hold it, we don't propose to collect it.
No, you don't hold it, no. I know other councillors may have a view on that. But anyway, Tom.
Yeah, my comment has to do with the forest and bird one preceding that regarding FEMPS and Plan Change 6. And the explanation of not providing the request being based on the fact that we as a council don't apparently even possess the FEMPS, which are the principal enforcement mechanism for Plan Change 6, and therefore could not respond because we didn't possess them. We get summaries apparently or something. I would really like to see a legal opinion that says that FEMPS are private property of people that we are regulating to deal with our most sensitive water quality issues. So I don't accept this whatsoever as a formal position of this council that no, we don't have them, we can't give them, et cetera. This needs to be looked at a lot more carefully. We have municipalities who have to comply with our oversight and do monitoring, and we see those. We have access to those reports. We have an opportunity to question their validity, completeness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there are other examples like that, consent conditions and so forth. So how in the world the principal instrument of enforcement for a plan change could not be a matter, an informational matter, at least in the hands of the council, so we might then debate whether it is commercially sensitive or whatever. But it seems like just an incredible position to be taking.
So if I could perhaps to respond to that. So the environmental information that we do hold from the farm environment management plans are the nutrient budgets, and those are the key requirements for us in terms of being able to manage the requirements of us put on us by Plan Change 6, particularly around the DIN limit, and the requirement for us to assess whether or not a landowner will require resource consent after the 31st of May next year. So we hold all that information. That information was provided to Forest and Bird through a spreadsheet. The actual farm environment management plan in its entirety has other matters of information that are relevant to the farmer but not to the regional council and us carrying out our duty, and so for example that could include obviously financial information. And I understand that that could, potentially be redacted, but we also have, in addition to Lagoima, we have responsibilities under the Privacy Act, and we cannot hold information that we're not going to use for a specific purpose. So from our perspective, we hold the information that we're required and that we need to be able to do our job, which is fundamentally in the form of the nutrient budget.
So this is, sorry, can I just add to that? This has been a formally adopted long-standing policy since Plan Change 6 became operative. It has been the subject of considerable debate and scrutiny internally. There is...
Table?
So you will have seen it in things like the working towards implementation documentation that's been presented previously. It'd be going back some years, but this is not a new position that's been taken. It was one at the outset, and it was one, I think, which was developed in response to some sensitivity from the primary sector and providers around what information council would hold that may subsequently be used for a compliance purpose. The question of whether we should hold more information than we presently do is a live one nationally, as the government is looking to regulate mandatory farm environment management plans and to determine what information councils should hold. So that is being discussed right now between regional councils and central government, and I would expect by the end of this year there to be regulations that will define with some specificity what information must be provided. We are in the murky territory of permitted activities. So the examples that you referred to with territorial authorities, for example, they're operating under a resource consent, and we have legal powers in which we can stipulate a whole range of things. What Plan Change 6, in requiring this but requiring it within a permitted activity framework, did not do is specify the precise information that was required over and above that which Liz has referred to.
Can I just ask
Yeah.
Got a supplementary in there as well.
follow-up question? So as Tom quite rightly points out, farm environment management plans are the basis of catchment management.
Yep.
And I guess I'm similar to a lot of people sitting around this table in having never seen one.
Right.
And I would very much like for us to either have a workshop or maybe part of the next Environment and Services Committee meeting to actually have a look at a sample plan and see what it covers and, what farmers have input into us, because I'd like to know.
So I think that's a great suggestion. We should bring it to ENS, and I think that the point you raise actually underscores the point that Liz was making. Some of them are very skinny and provide the bare minimum, such as an overseer budget and not much more. Some of them are incredibly elaborate documents that will tell a 10-year vision of the development of that property, and we've encouraged them to be multi-purpose documents that bring in the economic planning of the business, and it might have succession planning, it might have a whole bunch of things brought into it as the master document for the plan for the farm. And this is where you get into the debate about what should be provided to the regulator and what is the business of the farm itself. So I think we should have further discussion over this. It's a moving space nationally, and as we go to other catchments, tank and beyond, we're going to need a more definitive position on this.
Yeah, this is really interesting because for our farm plan, it was submitted, our provider submitted it to council staff.
So we've received them and we've checked that they meet the requirements, and then they get sent back to the provider or to the landowner. Okay. So we don't continue to hold them. And again, there's also a question of 1,100 of them. We go regionally, we go to 7,000 of them. We're going to digitise all of them. Some of them go to many pages, lots of maps and photographs. And so we're going to build a whole apparatus. Now, we might be in the business of doing that. Then that becomes a national conversation about, is there a national infrastructure built for these nationally? And that might be something hosted at the national level with a whole set of protocols around it. And that's the nature of the discussion now.
So actually, my question, I haven't had my question yet, sorry. That was, so you provided this information to Forest and Birdless, but have you notified the landowners that there is information that's gone out to an NGO about them?
No, not specifically, no.
Well, that's 1,100 of them. I mean, it's...
No, it's 48.
48.
Oh, sorry.
48
Oh,
under
the surface water
yeah.
consents.
Because that would be a courtesy, I would have thought. That, I mean, they're under the spotlight. It's good that they are aware of that. It's a reminder too.
So we just going forward, we have a creeping extension service that we're creating called Integrated Catchment Management Plan. We're subsidizing farmers 75%, 25% to do things on their land in terms of fencing and riparian planting and so forth and so on, to suggest that we, going forward, would not have a clear view as to, we have people who want irrigation rights preserved. We have all sorts of things going on that would be informed, our policies would be informed by understanding. We keep being told property by property, we need to understand what's going on here, and we don't have a willingness, it appears, to use the tool that's supposed to be sitting in front of us for that purpose. To me, that's an unacceptable place for us to be as a council. We have to have some discussion of this.
So we are using the farm environment plans as a requirement to access the erosion control scheme grant funding, and when the applications come through, they will typically have a range of maps of the property with indications of what's being done where, but that information will often be drawn from a farm plan, and we will retain that which is specifically required for decision making in relation to our funds. I know it's starting to dance on the head of a pin about what we're holding and what we're not requiring. It is a whole area that requires further thinking, and I personally am of the view that we are moving to a space nationally where the regulation of individual farm properties will be such that we will hold comprehensive information on land use activity. In fact, I have seen just today a letter gone to the Minister on behalf of the regional sector suggesting that a national environmental standard requiring information from all farm properties to regional councils about current land use activity, etc., is something that has progressed.
Anyway, we've decided we're going to have an action point, Rick.
Could I just add to that? I just think they're all tied together. I just think we should have a paper come back to ENS or whichever it is, which has outlines what the range of expectations about a farm management plan, sets out specifically what the requirements the regional council has now, what it may require in the future, what the regional council intends to hold and not hold of information, and the next part of it is what the privacy requirements are of this. Because I do have some sympathy for the farmers. If they want to provide us with a farm management plan, extensive all the rest of it, I wouldn't expect that to be then forwarded on to Forest and Bird or anybody else because someone's put an OIA request in it. We can only take information which we are entitled to, and if we do, we have to have some security around that. So we need to have an explanation of what the privacy issues are, the requirement issues are, so we put that on the deck and we can see it clearly so that Tom's issues can be addressed in a comprehensive way, and we then have it's fudgy at the moment. We just need a paper that sets out what these things are.
Okay, we've had enough discussion on this. I think we've got the message.
Just one further question. Can you tell me if consents, consents are obtainable under the OIA? So if I've got a consent for a well, for example, or any other consent, can that consent and its documentation be requested?
Yes, it can. It's public information.
Okay, look, I want to finish this. I think we have the action point. We're going to come back. We were thinking to come back with a workshop, but if Rick's going to come back to...
Well, it's a paper to ENS.
It's a paper to ENS.
That's the precedent, really.
On that issue. Okay, let's move on. We'll call for minor items not on the
Sorry,
agenda.
can we just have a motion to accept the follow-ups?
Do we need that?
Sorry,
Yes, please.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have one item, and that relates to the information request from Catherine Bayliss.
Is that the one I talked about?
And the response by staff, which says that the ethical investment section excludes, where possible, the direct involvement in fossil fuels. I can't recall that, but if I'm wrong, tell me.
Yes,
That was the case.
that was agreed.
And you debated it vigorously at the time.
But then, you know, the operation of a refinery and of a retail chain, which will be in business doing what they're doing for at least 50 or 60 years, I imagine. And given that this council, with its staff, and its port and whatever is probably the largest consumer of petrol and diesel in Hawke's Bay. Surely that is, it's quite nonsensical and hypocritical. And I don't believe that
So I just don't.
It was debated at the time.
Yeah, I just don't think we can relegate that debate right here, Alan. If we want to do it, we need to bring it up.
And you did raise those issues at the time.
You did.
That
well, I
will be using.
think they need revisiting. I mean, weren't we going to have a workshop or something on
Yes,
petrol investments?
we're having the fund managers are coming to our June CNS.
Sorry?
The fund managers for our investment portfolios are coming to the June corporate and strategic meeting, so we can have a discussion about ethical investments there.
Yeah, and the council can rebate it.
I'll save it till then.
Okay, do we have someone to move? We've
I'll move.
accept the follow-up. Thank you, Rick. Second that. All those in favour? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Call for minor items.
One item, Chair, Hawke's Bay Drinking Water Governance Joint Committee.
Any others?
Carbon footprint and air travel.
Any others? Okay, we have two. We'll deal with them. Item 6, significant activities.
Chair, we'll just take those by questions.
We will. Any questions or issues?
Chair, just on the first page of that report, page 15, the heading, more white bait. Is there actually any more white bait?
Could I add to that? There's one word missing there, more white bait, please.
Yeah, it's in Rick's fridge.
Pretty good item.
So, through you, Chair, just to note that there's no commentary here from asset management. So I was on leave and we were late submitting the information.
That's why it's short. You do all the work.
So, but quite happy to answer any questions on any of the usual
Who had his hand up? Oh, Deb, sorry, Deb.
There's no commentary from the chair either. He missed his report too. You might notice.
Which report's that?
Your chair report that you put in monthly. Been missing for a while. So my question is with regard to catchment management, and the discussions have begun around more effective use of the regional council site in Waipak. Who's involved with those discussions? How is that panning out? Is that Ian perhaps? Or?
So that's involving our facilities manager and the catchment staff. That's basically, we own a site. How can we utilise that in terms of our operational activities for storage of equipment, gear, plants, those sorts of things.
So it's not a public discussion, it's just amongst the staff?
Yeah, it's just an operational question. It's been underutilised as an asset for some time, and obviously we've got growing activity in the district. So looking at how we can best use that.
Thank you.
Two questions, Chair.
Yes.
Or comment. Biosecurity, biodiversity. I noticed there was a school challenge came out with respect to having a whole bunch of kids trying to track down moth plant and have a moth plant count and get rid of that. Do you know if the council was involved in that at all?
We will be. I just don't recall off the top of my head on exactly what form, but Louise Hemplin's involved in that.
Yep, that's cool. Just one of those could work things that we should be in touch with. And number 39, the Panpack leak. Have you got any update on where they are with the work to fix the pipe?
Through you, Mr Chair, no, not since I wrote this last Wednesday, so that was the last update that we'd had.
Okay, cool.
Neil?
Yes, Mr Chair. Item 43 on page 20. 4 resource consent applications for Landcorp discharging stormwater and rainwater into the Ahuriri estuary are on hold. Is there any progress as to what is the progress on those consents?
There's been no progress that I'm aware of since the last of these reports. So 2 of them are on hold pending consultation with iwi. and 2 are on hold pending the provision of further information. And to the best of my knowledge, and I should have checked before I came down here, we haven't received that yet.
Is there a timeline on this?
No, there's not. The consents are on hold, and they're able to be put on hold. And we haven't put a time frame on them yet, but we are in active discussions with them to keep things moving.
And sorry, just item 45 as well, similar request. The time frame for wastewater discharge in the section 92.
The section 92, they have started providing answers to some of the questions, so they're, if you like, drip feeding it to us, and they are anticipating, I think, having all the answers to us by the end of this month. We would like to notify that application in June.
So, yeah, I wonder if we note the parameters for our commentaries here, if we've got.
Tom and then Peter. And then we'll go around the table.
On number 46, the consents that are going to expire on the 31st of May. Just refresh me as to what our handling of that is going to be. What are we going to do with those?
Good question. I haven't actually talked to the staff about that. Look, I'll have to give you an update. I'll give you an email about that and just sort of find out which staff member is processing those.
From recollection, though, I think they're on short-term rollover with triggers in there for when the tank plan change goes operative. They then have the new provisions deemed into them. So it's a holding position.
Not going to be any rationalising of them undertaken at this point?
Not while the tank policy is remaining.
Stay away from them.
Right. Benton, and then we'll come to you, Peter.
The road realignment, our part of it at the New Hawke River Road seems to have fallen off the radar. Where is that?
So that's been redesigned, and it's off the design and quantities are off the pricing with the contractor.
Are we doing that in conjunction with Wairau District Council?
They're fully informed. We're working for Wairau District Council. Yep.
Tranche 2 water, Ruataniwha.
Thank you.
The applications have been on hold since, I don't know, late-ish last year under section 92.
Like the year before, I think.
Oh, really? So it's like 18 months?
It has been a while, yes.
Is there any limit statutorily to how long under section 92 something can be on hold?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Really?
Will someone move that we accept the... Thank you, Rick.
Oh, sorry, I have a question.
Oh, you got a question, huh?
I'll move.
Well, I thought you were going around the table. Just a quick one. I see under the catchment management, we have a central team and a southern team. Implies there's a third team. Is there a northern team?
There's a northern team.
There is, Councillor, but the northern team have failed to report this period and has been contacted. My apologies.
Okay.
Good question.
Happy to second.
Derry moves, Rick seconds. All those in favour? Aye. Thank you very much. Item 7. This is something that's dear to everyone's heart.
Thank you. So this is about the order of candidates' names on the voting papers for the upcoming elections. So previously we've always used a alphabetical approach. Obviously that's got a logic to it. There are other options available, which is explained there where there's a pseudo-random option or a random version which uses electronic means. There are no cost implications for any of the options, but there is some evidence that an alphabetical version can potentially influence how people vote. So we're proposing that we go with the random option, and whether you're comfortable with that.
So if the
Questions first.
yes, this is a question. If the basis is that there is a potential for the name at the top of the list to be the one that gets the most ticks, and that might favour somebody whose name begins with B for argument's sake. Then by randomly selecting the order, all you do is change the person who might get the at the top of the voting paper. So it seems to me that the electronically randomised one, which will leave everybody with an equal number of occasions where their name will be at the top, would be the fairest if that's the issue. So why wouldn't you recommend that one?
That's the one we have.
They have.
No, not electronically randomised, or just a random
Yes.
selection?
Electronically randomised.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Any other questions?
In that case, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing is that...
Rick Barker.
I
I'm going to you. I'm going into alphabetical order.
All right, no, two questions. Firstly, you say the suggestion is that there may be. I would have thought you're only going to make a suggestion if you had some evidence. We're not going to deal with things by mystic belief, are we? So I want to know, is there evidence, firstly, that such a thing occurs? Secondly, being an evidential-based entity, I want you to show me, given that there's been some other examples of where this has been changed, I want you to provide me some evidence where it has actually improved the voting outcome.
And how do you do that?
This question from a man with the name BA.
Yes. A lot of bees around the table.
I'll second that.
The point about it is, people have said that the number on the thing, the order of this is gives some people advantage. My view is that that's insulting to the person who's filling out the ballot paper and says that they're not capable of making an informed decision and an informed vote, which I reject. I reject it.
Benton keeps on getting elected with a right at the end.
He does.
W.
I just want to tell you, I've been in politics a long time, I've heard this said, and I've never had anybody yet come along with any evidence that supports this mystic belief.
You're still here?
Well, further to that, Mr Chairman, Councillor Curtin, to the best of my knowledge, has always topped the poll in the Napier constituency, and he's certainly not at the top of the list. Sure, he intends
It's not
to
the
do
top of anybody's list, by the way.
On a variety of fronts.
Thank you, Councillor.
Chair, can I just add to that?
Yes,
I have
Mr. Bailey.
to Councillor Barker. I recall reading some research on that a number of years ago. I honestly couldn't remember where it was to actually give it to you, but it was one of those studies that I saw come out of the States, one of the universities over there. So there is actually evidence that it does influence the outcome of.
So we can look to provide some information on that if that would be helpful. Do you want? Does that affect your decision making?
Well,
today?
the third point is that on these things which are governance, I have a strong preference that the council officers put up the options and the councils choose. That's my view about this. I think it's a fundamental fault with the paper. But anyway, the point I make is, if you're going to make a suggestion for change, I want to see the evidence which says the change is required for this. And then, if you're going to say it's a change for the better, I want you to identify where the better is and some evidence for that. We are an evidence-based entity. We don't deal in mystic belief.
Well, a quick Google search is suggesting that there is ample evidence on this and it's been studied to death. I mean,
I think we need a meta-analysis of all of the studies.
Well, sensibly, there is
sometime by Christmas.
There's a cost benefit around us doing considerably more work on this. There's a choice that's provided for in the Act.
Chair.
I'm happy to move
that we don't resolve to.
You want to move to that we do this?
Let's go
I'm
randomised.
happy to move the recommendations 1 and 2, if it would make anybody happy. You can put one, you can put all the options there, and then I've selected number 2, but I'm happy.
I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Well, I think, Mr Chair, that Councillors Bailey, Bevan, Barker and Belfort actually have a conflict of interest.
Okay, we've got to move in a second to accept the recommendation, which I intend to oppose. I just think the alphabetical, I don't know, I just think it's all a nonsense, but anyway.
Mr Chair?
Those in favour?
Hang on, Mr Chair.
So is it possible to have the sitting members in bigger font than the challenging ones?
And the Maori's in a different colour. So we have a move and a second. Do you wish to speak, Debbie, to it? Who was the seconder? Paul?
I suppose it's kind of like what is it? goose, or turkey knocking its head off and putting itself forward for Christmas dinner. But I see this as an issue of fairness. I mean, I've seen evidence that it does actually influence outcome, the order of names on the paper, and I'm a great believer in everyone having a fair crack of the whip when it comes to democracy like that. So I'm happy to support random order on the voting papers.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm not prepared to do that. You end up with the discrimination now of those at the top of the paper. Why not just put everyone at the bottom of the paper? So, if you get that meaning.
No.
I didn't think you would.
Are there any other speakers? I'm in Neil's camp. I just think it's rubbish, but there might be evidence. There's evidence for all sorts of stuff.
Quite a lot of evidence.
Is there quite a lot of evidence?
Looking at this, it's been studied to death.
The point is that why isn't it in the paper?
We can provide it offline, but, you know, there's a question of giving you too many papers, but we can...
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, but I just think papers should have the information. If we're going to put information about something, it should be in the paper. And it should be, we're making a recommendation to this because, and the evidence should be in there, and we're going to go to a web place, and this is where we expect to get. I just felt this took one jump. But here we are, I've got the option, this is what we recommended. I didn't get all of the other things with it. I feel this is a failure of the paper.
Okay, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against?
No.
No. I think it's passed, wasn't it?
No, let's have a show of hands on this.
All those in favour? Against?
Get defeated.
Defeated. With status quo.
Status quo. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hang on, what is the status quo? That is the status quo. The legislation says that's the default unless we decide otherwise, is it?
That's right.
Well, that's what we had last time. It's interesting that Curtin, Graham and Wilson, you voted with us too, didn't you?
I was in favour.
Hey? He was in favour. Get yourself on the top.
But you're the only one there, Finn.
Actually, Neil's logic clicks in with you. Okay, we're reverting. Okay, item 8. James, do you want to take us through that? Were you on the bus?
No, I was not. I was not there.
Oh, you were not there. Well then, who else is...
I was there.
You were there. Oh, you think you can talk? The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. I think you were there too.
I was there.
So, a number of us were on the bus to Waipatu Marae. Mohaka Marae, sorry. It was a very interesting day. Thoroughly enjoyed it myself. The meeting at the Marae was a relatively light agenda. I can talk predominantly to the Tangata Whenua remuneration review if you've got questions. We did definitely have a quorum. We checked that. Do you need an explanation of
No.
I'm going to ask for one.
Are you?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I provided it to you by email last night, but do you want to hear the verbal?
I hear it. I want to understand in a public session why, as an elected official, I could conceivably be disenfranchised from voting on matters of consequence to my constituency, because that's what the present legislation implies. And we had there was a quorum at the meeting because we have one unfilled seat, as I understand it, which would have meant one less councillor participating. But since the numbers worked out as it happened, there was no requirement for a elected councillor to stand aside in making these decisions. I don't think anybody in Hawke's Bay really understands that that is the governance arrangement that we presently have in the RPC, and I would like clarification as to should this occasion arise again and all of us councillors are here, we are now apparently faced with a situation where there will always be one councillor, a councillor, who will not participate in RPC decisions because there is a vacant seat. So there's 8, and there needs to be 8 councillors on the other side participating. So could you just remind me what the process will be for disenfranchising the 9th councillor in the future meetings of the RPC?
So my recollection off the top of my head is that there's no mechanism stipulated in the legislation for standing down one or more councillors to match the numbers on either side. It would be a choice that the council would need to make. We're working on the assumption that if we find ourselves in that situation at the next Regional Planning Committee meeting or thereafter, that we will need to bring to council a decision for you to take a nomination from councils, or I guess an offer of somebody to stand down, and that might be based on people's availability for a meeting. If all 9 councillors wish to stand, then that's something we're possibly going to need to get some legal advice on how somebody is essentially forced to not vote at the committee. Could be done in a, by something out of a hat, drawn out of a hat. It could be potentially something at the discretion of the chair, which I think would be problematic as well. Look,
when is our next meeting of the RPC?
It's on the 15th of this month.
15th.
So there will not be a replacement for this other.
One is being worked on presently, and we're hopeful that we will receive a formal appointment letter from Tū Wharetoa prior to that meeting, making an appointment so that we have somebody available for that meeting.
In which case, this would be a moot issue, but at the moment it's not.
At this very moment in time, it's not. So
you're preparing that memorandum that you just described, recommending what our course of action will be.
I've had correspondence in the last week suggesting that an appointment, at least an interim appointment from Tū Wharetoa, is imminent. So that's currently the plan we're working to. But look, it's problematic, I think.
I have some sympathy for Tom. I don't think a councillor should ever stand down. I think that's just wrong. And it is responsibility of Tangata Whenua to ensure that they meet the expectation of numbers. So that's just my thoughts on the matter. I think it's absolutely wrong, and if it's written somewhere, well, it's still wrong. Tom's right. We were elected by the people in our wards, and we have a responsibility to be. If we can't be present, we apologise, and some councillors were unable to be present at this meeting and did put their apologies in, and some of the Tangata Whenua did, but if it's not equal, well, it's behest of the people to be there. That's my view. Denton.
Thank you, Chair. No, I absolutely agree. I just a question of the Chief Executive. Could they, what is the actual Tangata Whenua view on this? I mean, do they expect one of us to stand down? And could we ascertain that before the next meeting and perhaps some legal advice?
Well, I guess regardless of their view, the legislation is clear, which is to say that they might have some sympathy with the council's position on this, but the Act doesn't provide any outs from it, really. Just says that the number of council members on the RPC is reduced proportionately until a replacement member is appointed by the relevant Tangata Whenua appointer. And I do note that a number of those involved in the committee at present were involved in the drafting of the legislation, so clearly had this issue clearly in mind when it was put through. It is one of a number of matters that we have identified as being of concern with the legislation that obviously we'd like to see some revisitation around, but that's problematic.
I'm not so stressed out about it because it is in the Act, so you've got to comply with the Act. But
sometimes the law's wrong.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes the law is an arse, right? So that's fine. But at the end of the day, too, the RPC isn't the final decision-making body for anything that's put before the RPC. That still has to come back to full council. So there's a check and balance in there in any event. So that's why I'm not.
Are you volunteering to be the one stand down?
Well, if everyone's going to get their knickers in a twist about it, you don't mind too much.
Youngest?
Well, I was going to say I'm the newest, so I was going to say the newest. I was going to say that the newest on council, Debbie, rather than the youngest.
Chair, look, Councillor Bailey's right at one level that it's not uncommon for councils to have committees which are a subset of their council laws, and therefore not all councillors, while we typically on our committees have all councillors represented, in other circumstances there are subsets and they make recommendations. The only problem I have with it in this circumstance is that the Act has mechanisms in it which make it essentially impossible for the council to deviate from the recommendations of this committee. Indeed, it can refer back, but it can't depart from in matters of RMA planning. So this is not a committee under law which simply provides advice. This is a committee which does have the power of decision making, albeit those decisions formally have to be ratified by a subsequent council meeting. So it is problematic.
And if it gets referred back, then hopefully by that time tangata whenua have upped their numbers, so you can come back and vote.
So, technically we had a quorum, Tom.
We did.
Well, I understand that.
Doesn't it, could I just put another aspect of this? It's not normal for everybody to turn up to each of these meetings. And whilst there is a potential, as Tom has put it, it could be that we don't have a problem simply because of an absence of a councillor or two. So we're facing only this problem if everybody decides to turn up on the day, which hasn't been the case for a while.
Agreed.
Sorry?
Agreed.
I'm happy to move the report, Chair.
Well, no, we haven't finished. We finished?
Well, unless anyone's got any questions about the report, but basically we had two main discussion items, which was the potential Tukituki plan change, where there was an agreement not to progress the proposed plan change to defer the 2018 minimum flow regime till 2021. And the other item was around the tangata whenua remuneration review and discussion on the draft terms of reference. They have agreed to the engagement of Strategic Pay to do that review, but the draft terms of reference, there was some suggestion to change some of the wording and that would be signed off by the co-chairs. So I've been working on that offline with them. There was discussion around the annual plan approach about whether the council's proposed no consultation. That was agreed, they were advised, but yep, there was no issue. And then some minor updates, which were also presented and taken as read. So from here, unless you've got any particular questions, that's the update. But it was a great day. We had I would just add personally, we had a great visit. We were well received, and personally I learnt a lot. So it was good to get off site.
So, question through you, technical question with the Chief Executive. If you have a feedlot and you decide to change the name to a standoff feed pad or some other name, does that exempt you from having a feedlot?
Well, the feedlot is defined by the lack of continuous ground cover, and animals being kept within that area of no continuous ground cover for in excess of 14 days. So it's not so much a question of the name that the landowner deems the operation to be, it's whether or not they meet the rules. And while I wasn't there on the day, I understand there was and is supposedly continuous pasture cover within the holding area of that operation. So wouldn't meet our feedlot technical definitions. However, I had previously been advised that they were seeking resource consent for their operation, and there seems to be some debate about whether or not that was necessary or that's something they've just done proactively.
I understood from Luke it was something they did proactively.
Yeah.
Okay. Since this is a publicly recorded meeting, I think it's important to say that the feedlot, if you want to call it that we visited, was used in an entirely different way to other feedlots, in that it was a summer utilised feedlot, as opposed to the winter ones that most other farms use. And that meant that it was, no, well, that's what they told us. And it certainly did have pretty much continuous grass cover.
So, following question, why are they storing feed to use in the winter now then?
Well, I don't know, but we were told, I just want to talk about this too, it looked pretty impressive to us. There were 3 hectare paddocks, there was grass in every paddock, and they said when the grass gets down, they move the cattle. There was a hard surface next to where the cattle are fed, and maybe 3 metres of where it got a bit muddy, and they were looking at how they deal with that. It looked pretty professional to us, and it didn't look like any feedlot I'd ever seen before. So it was a pretty impressive operation. But we need to watch those things.
And they'll be subject to compliance activity over the winter, as all the operations that are consented for feedlots will be.
You know, you were moved, didn't you, Debbie?
No, I think Paul did. I was just going to ask if you could take number 4 separately.
Number 4 separately?
Just for the sake of consistency.
Oh, no, I don't.
I'll be speaking to him.
No, I just don't. Well, we can do if you really insist. Okay. Rightio, let's take number 4 separately. It was unanimous on the day. Well, no, it mustn't have been because you were there, weren't you?
Number 2, it wasn't unanimous.
Okay, so Paul, will you move everything except number 4?
He can move it all.
I'll move the whole lot.
Move it all.
Yeah.
So do we have a second to move it all then? Second. Paul, do you wish to speak?
No, I thought it was a fantastic day. I really enjoyed the trip. It's a really special part of the Hawke's Bay which I'd never visited before. Really appreciated the being able to the two marae on one day. I thought that was great. And the visit to the feedlot was something that impressed me. There's always these things, you know, if you look them in a spectrum where some are operating really, really poorly and some are operating really, really well, it certainly would be up there in the really, really well category.
Rick, could you wish to speak?
I'll hold my right of reply, thank you.
Debbie?
Right to speak.
Thank you. I would like to speak. The decision to wrap up the proposed deferral to the plan change that was always going to happen. One of the actions that I requested on the day was that was well communicated to the affected parties, given that there's been a great deal of expectation hinged on that. So I'd just reiterate that. It was a really big day. I left home at 6:30 in the morning, and by the time we were 2 hours overdue in the evening, I managed to hitchhike an early ride home, which was still after 8 before I got home. But I would like to acknowledge our hosts and the work Penny and the team put into the day out. It was really interesting. We were made very, very welcome. We met some really interesting people. One of the highlights for me was when I was quietly presented with a hanging stone at the end from Robin Happy, who had noticed my interest, and so that was a little gift I took home that I will treasure. And in terms of what we learnt up there, I think just listening to people's stories, that's the best part of it when you're in these things. We were a captive audience on the bus with Tora on the way up, and I was really privileged to jump in the vehicle with Luke Hanson on the way home. Luke is the general manager of the what's this?
Aotea Pāwera Development Trust.
Thank you, the trust. And so I got Luke's version of what's going on in all the farms and properties, and I was really privileged to have that oversight. He's a very, very talented man. Interestingly, he's partners to one of your key staff here. So overall, it was a very enjoyable day. Thank you to all those who organised it.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that. I think it was a fantastic day. It was a good example of why we need to get out more into our regions. It was we were really welcomed. We went up into the high country where there was some dispute whether the people who welcomed us up there were Tūhoi or Parawera, a bit of both, I guess. But it was certainly a special moment for us all around those lakes, to get a view of Hawke's Bay that many of us hadn't had the privilege to see, and to be entertained and at that whare, the round whare that with Daniel O'Keefe's, Captain Daniel O'Keefe's mask, and I also got a hanging stone which is now sitting at my front door. And the other thing too is I had to report to Councillor Barker, who wasn't there, that the goats on the cliff looked like they needed some attention. And we're figuring out how we get him out of the mohawker after he deals to them. So it was all in all a really great day. So we have a mover and second. Does anyone else wish to speak?
Yes.
Yes, Mike.
So For those of you who don't know, Pahuwera means burnt beard, so it's one of the ancestors that obviously was too close to the fire. And in 1940s and 50s, my grandfather was the sole rabbiter for that area. And down where the new bridge is, you can see the old bridge, it used to be what they call the rabbit bridge, and you had to toot the horn at night to go through because the wire netting came down to stop the rabbits going from one area to another.
Yeah. Rick, you were holding.
Oh, I'm happy to just vote now. I think we've got all the information we need.
All those in favour?
That was
illuminated.
Yeah. I'd just like to say, add to that, Chair, and summing up, that I also think in terms of part of the reason we're up there, having the meeting up there, is this kind of like start kicking off the process around the Mohaka plan change and finding out a bit about the values of the community up there around that part of the area, and I thought that was a really, really good way to do that, because certainly that was something that really came across about how special that part of the Mohaka was to those people.
Thank you. All those in favour? Aye. Aye. Against? Oh no, going to take one by one. Sorry, Debbie.
No, you can do everything except for.
Do everything except for.
Yeah. Okay. So we're voting on. That was the voting on the everything except for.
Yep.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Now item 4.
Aye.
Aye.
Those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Against.
Oh wow.
Oh, I'm growing in numbers.
What's the result, Chair?
It's passed.
Carried. Thank you.
Carried. Closer than we thought, though. Okay, item 9, fixing the common seal. Do we have a mover?
Yes, I move.
Fenton moves, Rick will second. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Information items 10. Napier port transaction. Jessica.
Thank you. Chair. This is the public project update from the Executive Steering Committee. Most of the material I think we covered in the workshop this morning, but just effectively updates the community in terms of the work that proceeds around the due diligence that is being carried out, and the preparation for an initial public offering continues. And we expect to make a decision to proceed in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Mr. Chair, a note at 6.1 that the management team conducted meetings with a range of potential institutional investors. Can you give us some idea of how successful or otherwise that consultation was, please?
Yes, so the Chief Executive and I did have a debrief from the advisors in terms of the non-deal roadshow, and the feedback from them was that the roadshow had been very successful. There was a lot of interest in New Zealand and offshore, and the company itself was of interest to investors, and the management team were well received by the investors.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Alan. We have a mover. Seconder. Tom. Speak, Alan. Tom. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Recommendation is carried. Item 11. Annual plan is you again.
So this
We made the newspapers on our...
we did. So it's good to see the Hawke's Bay Today reading our agendas online. That's good. So in terms of an overview, we have just conducted a forecast for the full year ending the 30th of June. In summary, we do expect to be able to balance the P&L this year in line with our budget. We do have some revenue shortfalls particularly around investment returns, whereby the 40 million we've placed in our diversified investment portfolios, it took a little bit longer than we had anticipated to get the funds up and running. In addition to that, the market was fairly soft in the last quarter of the prior calendar year. We do have the fund managers coming in to speak to us at our Corporate and Strategic Committee meeting in June, so it'll be interesting to see the returns, the reports and the achieved returns when we speak to the fund managers then. But there is a revenue shortfall this year to cover to the tune of $350,000. The report does outline some of the other areas where we are underspent and some of the overspent areas, and as you alluded to, Mr Chair, the port consultation is overspent by $100,000. In terms of that spend, that was really just responding to the community's expectations. The consultation, the duration of the consultation was longer than we anticipated, and some of the legal advice and the postage and the consultation expenses were higher in terms of reach to the community. So broadly, we do expect to come in on budget, and included in this reforecast, we do still hold our $100,000 contingency, and we will come back to you in June with information around any budgets that staff would like to carry forward into next year, which is underspent, for your approval, and any information around that contingency, whether or not it needs to be utilised. Manton is here to answer questions, and this is Manton's last council meeting. He will be leaving us next week.
So sad.
So thank you to Manton for all of his hard work.
Too sad.
And yeah, you'll be missed.
Where's you going, Manton?
I am going just locally to a company called Markham who do concrete products around the globe. So just reacquainting myself with profit and margins and stuff like that. So yeah.
Oh.
But very much enjoyed my time with you guys. Most of the time.
So yeah, happy to take any questions around the
Paul,
report.
and then Debbie.
Thank you, Chair. I have a number of questions. I'm not entirely sure whether they're for you, Jess, but it's about page 45, where it's got actual performance around the Awatoto air shed exceedances.
That's the next section, isn't it?
No, it's not. This is all to do the... Is that the next paper?
No, sorry, it is all combined.
It does include the non-financial performance measures, yeah.
Okay, so you've got
Okay.
the wording in here. The wording in here frustrates me. The first Awatoto exceedance in December 2018 looks a combination of windblown material and sea salt. If we're talking about going and investigating an exceedance of something that's in the airshed, which is which is like an enforcement issue, just saying. I mean, again, it's the optics of it. Looks like a combination of wind. It either is or it isn't. Just saying it looking like it is, I think, is not quite good enough.
So look, we'd have to get Kathleen to come and give you a view on that. Can I suggest that we'll get Kathleen to contact you directly, Councillor, and just provide you with an explanation. I do know that, because I was looking at one yesterday with her, the sampling rings that she takes out of the air sampler is literally a disc that has obviously a permeable material, and so she'll do a visual inspection on that, and so when it looks like what she's probably said is that there's no evidence of it being ash or combustion. There was one there where there was, so she sent that off for analysis. If it's showing clear but it's blocked, then the assumption would be that it's probably salt from the coastal environment there, but I'll get her to confirm that directly with you.
Yep, okay then.
Would that be parallel to the legal term prima facie?
Second question, Paul.
Yep. Page.
Just before you leave that one, who legally is responsible? It's sort of reported that this is a separate legal entity called Awatoto that has exceeded. Who is responsible? So it's just a monitoring site, and we use that site particularly because of its windblown nature, if you like, as a reference site relative to the airsheds at Napier and Hastings. There's no legal entity. It's not monitoring the fertiliser works, for example, there. So it's our responsibility in terms of monitoring air quality across the region as a whole.
Okay.
So there's nobody responsible?
We're responsible. And so these become triggers for further policy action. So the exceedances, particularly in the airsheds, trigger more and more controls on things like the further permitting of industrial discharges.
If Hastings was over its allowed exceedances, it would be the Hastings District Council, would it not, who had to do something?
No, so we're the ones that will consent discharges to air, and the current policy is, as I understand it, once we hit the triggers for Hastings, right, we are no longer allowed under the air plan to issue further consents for industrial discharges to air.
So the job, therefore, of, let's say, stepping up better home burners falls to us, not to Hastings.
Correct.
Okay. Page 46. Again, talking about second box down, actual performance, point number 1, ESC has capacity. I haven't seen any reports that come through ENS or anywhere that talks about the Esk River, because it's not in one of our plan changes as yet. And it concerns me because I know I've had phone calls from members of the public in that area who've had this issue with bores that were efficient becoming inefficient. And I'm just concerned that how confident can we be that the Esk actually has capacity for further water takes without it affecting home bores up that way, or bores for home water supply. So are we able to have some feedback on that, or
Look, we have to give you a report on that. It will relate to the rules that exist in the Regional Resource Management Plan, which are the default prior to there being any specific NPSFM plan changes up there. So when it refers to has capacity to allocate, it will be as per those existing rules.
Yep, and so I want to make sure that if we do issue any further consents up there, that there is some condition in there that, or we need to think about whether the condition around dealing with this issue of efficient bores becoming inefficient at a later date. Page number 57, the hazardous level of service measure, a hazardous activities list database. I take it that's the one where we'd have this old landfalls noted, so that we don't get a West Coast scenario happening here.
Correct.
Yep. All good. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've got one or two comments I'd like to make. If we turn to page 46, where the headline on the left, level of service statement, is HBRC will encourage efficient and effective water use to maximise the benefits of water allocated, which is repeated for the next sort of couple of pages. Almost everything that's stated there is actually around the measuring and reporting rather than the encouragement of efficient and effective water use. In fact, I can find virtually nothing there that's to do with effective and efficient water use, which worries me a bit, because I would have thought that was actually a major ambition of ours. And then if I have a look on page 47, under actual performance, I think you need to explain this to me, number 6, halfway down. It's got historic over-allocation. Notice 1.141 million cubic metres is allocated. System above won't accept the 1,361% exceedance. I've adjusted the over-allocation to make this no more than a 3-digit figure! Exclamation mark. And yet we're on track as a status. Can somebody explain the apparent conflict in all of this to me? Seems extraordinary.
Look, again, we'll come back to you. On the first issue, you're quite correct that we do have a water use efficiency program that's targeted at the irrigation community, and we don't have a performance measure, if you like, around that work. The focus is obviously on the measuring, which is the impact of that work, but we could in the future, because of course these all come off the LTP measures, when we do either the annual plan revision next year or more appropriately the next LTP, is look at whether that water use efficiency work is reported by way of a performance measure.
Well, I'd certainly like some light cast on it, that would be good.
Yeah, but the specific question in relation to those numbers, we'd need to get somebody to come back to you on.
Right, so can we just park that?
Yeah, we'll come back to you on that. It's a comment that's been directly entered into our reporting system by some of the staff.
Okay, so if we could then turn to page 49. And if we look at the second column there, which is HBRC will work with farmers, etc., and it's got year one target is 100% FEMS. and the actual performance is less than 50 farms to be submitted, but we're on track. I would have thought we weren't on track. So I'm slightly surprised. I don't know whether those 50 farms have got their plans in or not, but they haven't got long to do it before the year's out. Then we look the next one down at the bottom of the same page. Our year one target is 2,000 hectares of land under cover, and our expected performance is 787 hectares of land, which is a long way short of 2,000, and yet we're on track. Please tell me how we can be on track if we're only meeting a third of our target. Then you turn over the page to, what is it, 50? And we have a target there of riparian plantings, and the target is 100 kilometres. Expected performance, at least 1 or 2 sites will be added to management. Well, are they 50 kilometres each or something? Because that's what would be needed to meet the target. So I've got some doubts about whether that's on track as well. So I think we probably need some more information to understand these reports.
Yeah, so there's a bit of work to do. You recall from the activity status that there's actually some relatively sizable kilometerage of fencing has been approved, and I know personally I've signed off significantly. So in terms of the 100 kilometres, I think we've got far more meaningful data to report against how we're going on that, and we probably are broadly on track.
Right, well, it might have helped.
This doesn't help very much.
No, it
I agree
doesn't, James.
with
It would have helped if you'd said 1 or 2 sites representing 100 kilometres of track,
Of
and then
course.
I'd know that was on target.
Yeah.
You can't even tell from
The
this.
year-end reporting will be much more specific around what's actually the work that has been done and what's approved. I think some of the planting is based on the pipeline and what's been approved spin-wise as opposed to planted in the ground.
I've got one on the emergency management. We had a decision to collect all the fees or money for emergencies for civil defence and run it centrally here, which we've done. We had an update report on how all of that's gone. We got the whole thing cemented down, done, running smoothly. We have Central Command has got complete control over all the fingers of civil defence across the region.
So,
I presume it has, but have we had a report that tells us that?
So you raise a really good point that, and it's one which we've discussed with Ian MacDonald. There is reporting on how all that's going to the emergency management group of which the chair sits with the region's mayors, and so there has been ongoing reporting of that. And we have had a discussion with Ian about the need to provide some individual reports to the 5 councils on that progress as well. My understanding is he is preparing a paper for all 5 councils on the performance of the year that's been under the new funding model. So I can tell you that it's been going very well. The group's come together well. The new funding model's working well in terms of the relationship between the other councils, but you need to see that in a formal paper. So we'll chase up where that's at.
I attend those meetings, and perhaps I should put it in my monthly report.
I think, well, I'm sure it was in your monthly report. I must have just overlooked it, that's all. But I thank you for that. That's all we need. And I think it's important for the regional council to get a report because we are the fund holder for that now.
Agreed.
And it should be the same report that goes to the others, but we should see it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could be indulged for a long-winded question. Not too long.
Not too long-winded.
I just want to look at the overall process of reporting that we've developed, and I'm very pleased to see the significant progress on this. And obviously staff have spent a lot of time, but it's a bit like painting your house white. You spend a lot of time selecting the paint, etc., but you step back and there's still a white house. And I've got a suspicion we're possibly in that position here. Yes, we understand that we painted the eaves white and this white and that white, but from my perspective, sitting above this or somewhere near it is an overview of our strategic positioning and our ability to measure our progress, because this is the long-term plan level of service. We've got a lot of detail as to whether we've got a kilometre or 2 kilometres or whatever, but are we actually making a difference? For example, nowhere in the report is it telling me how we're going with climate change and our carbon footprint and the like. And I just wondered whether prior to commencing 2019-20 data capture that we could have a report around this topic, perhaps go to the all-powerful Corporate and Strategic Committee on that, just so we've got a clear picture. Are we measuring the right things, or at least capturing the right approach? Is that possible, Joe, given us your brief?
Very happy to do that.
Yeah, and on the carbon footprint, the Fleet and Facilities Manager is currently engaged with a couple of different providers to give us some options and quotes around an ongoing continuous carbon footprinting program, monitoring and reporting for all of the council's operations. So that's a project she has underway presently, and we'll be bringing that information forward. So in principle, we've certainly committed to doing it.
I think
You'll note that the Hastings people carpooled this morning to help our carbon footprint.
yeah.
Only because one put his keys in the car.
No, it's deliberate action. I'll come to you in a minute, Debbie. I think the point that Neil's making is really important, that this is really evidence or proof that that we are doing the things that we said, because we're great visionaries here and great dreamers that we're going to do all these things. But people will ask us, well, what actually have you done? And I get that a lot. And it'd be really good if they say, well, actually, we did 200 Ks of riparian planting. I mean, I always quote the trees we plant. But it's a really good tool for councillors to have. Debbie.
Thank you. I have got 3 questions. Jess, are you in the position yet to tell us which fund managers performed the best, or do you need to wait till June?
We are getting reports at the moment, so we've got one of the 2 for their end of March quarter. So that'll go to the Finance Audit Risk Committee on the 22nd, I think it is, and we'll flow through to the full council.
I look forward to that.
But they have performed differently in terms of their asset allocation split.
Yeah,
which is
to analyse that and
all part of
provide a review.
the dual roles. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. My next question, James, I'm wondering whether you are in a position to give us an updated or report on Kahutia and progress, and maybe under other investments, is there a byline that you might be able to add there?
So we're not reporting on it at this stage because there's been no uptake of the carbon credits that were offered to Kahutia Limited. They had to prepare a business plan to submit to council for our approval prior to the uplift of those carbon credits, and the last I heard was they're still working on that business plan.
Thank you. And I'm interested in the page 36, the area of insurance and salary protection and life insurance cover. So what does that cover? Do we have Keyman insurance, or?
We have life insurance for all staff, and we also hold salary protection in the event of a significant injury or illness that takes somebody out of work on a permanent basis. Yep, and that's part of the overall package of benefits that we provide to staff.
Have you got life insurance for elected members? In the process, no.
You and I wouldn't get through it.
Question. In the process of council business?
No,
I've been used to it.
It's something which I think's never been contemplated.
You had a field trip out in the sticks the other day, but it wiped out half your council.
Well, we've got public liability insurance around those sort of things. If there's some kind of negligence or fault on the council for having caused that harm or loss. The situation we're in with staff, is a little bit different in so much as it is the primary form of income for staff and their families, and therefore the life insurance is there And to be clear, it's life insurance that covers death at work. It's not in relation to death that occurs outside of work.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I suggest that you look very closely at it because, for example, Napier City Council has it.
Right, okay. We'll give
That's a
that
good
some
point,
thought.
because I mean, I was driving from 6:30 in the morning to late at night. That's quite a big day.
Could I just ask a question? Would that normally be covered by ACC?
So,
we had a bus accident while we were on the thing. I thought we'd be covered by ACC.
yes, and our existing provisions provide essentially top-up. So when we lost a staff member nearly 2 years ago, we were in a position to provide substantial financial support to the family as a consequence of having our own insurance, which topped up significantly that which was provided by ACC in that circumstance.
And that was really, really a good situation. I think Alan's raising 2 points there, really. The one point is putting a whole lot of councillors in the bus. I did actually raise that at the time. Don't know whether it was how sensible that is. But anyway,
That's why I didn't
we're
go.
all here.
Look, we'll look into it, and look, adding another 9 people to our policy won't be a significant cost.
Okay, thank you. Well, Neil will
A
move.
rise of 5%.
Second up. Paul, you second?
Yeah.
You have to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to make comment about the state of our finances. Clearly, we're for a significant organisation to be tracking the way we are is a really a strong indication of excellent financial management behind the scenes. And take the opportunity to thank Manton for his work over the last couple of years, in particular, with change of financial management at the top. He's managed extremely well. I personally wish him the very best in his new role, but he'll be back. They all come back, we hope, and would welcome them back with the benefit of wisdom from the private sector. So well done, Manton, for the work that you do. The accounts demonstrate a high level of competence and diligence on the job, and all I can say is we're really thankful to have had your services for the time you've been here. Thank you.
Yes, I'd endorse that, Manton. Thanks very much for your services. We've always valued you, and we're sad to lose you, but private enterprise grabbed you, I guess, with a bit of a hook, less work, more money. That's the way it goes. So thanks for your service over the years, and yeah, we'll see you around because you're staying in Hawke's Bay. Are there any other speakers? Benton?
We've done.
Been moved. No, just it's about the bus. There's
You weren't on
a couple of people driving. I wouldn't get in with. I'll just put that out. Obviously, it was safe on the day, but I did note that Councillor Barker took his own vehicle, so you've got to follow that cagey logic.
So do I. Okay, we have a move and a second. All those in favour? Aye. It's carried.
Thank you, ma'am.
It's great work, Jessica, too.
Yes, Jessica.
Fantastic. Endorse. Okay, so we have item 12, Clifton to Tangoio.
So Chair Chris Dolly, so that he can get on with other important things, has asked me to just update the council on the joint committee meeting which was held in Hastings, 18th of March. There were 2 principal things that were discussed during that meeting. The first was the project timeline. As you're all aware, we're currently in the implementation phase and the work that precedes the actual spending of money, and that's really predicated on fine-tuning the modelling and design so that we can get a better handle on the actual cost of the works and determine which actions along the coast will be the priority. And that's taking longer than was originally envisaged, and our plan originally was to have a separate consultation prior to the next long-term plan consultation. It's likely now that it will be at the same time and maybe as part of the next long-term plan consultation, and the Joint Committee has asked for an update from the Technical Advisory Group, just assessing the risks and the pros and cons of doing that, and whether we should still be envisaging some form of separate consultation given the long-term importance of that coastal work. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and probably more importantly, the funding model, which is still very much in development, and a number of possible funding models have been discussed, and I think the Joint Committee is probably largely now in a position where it would recommend some form of hybrid funding model, but a model that doesn't just tap into the resources of the three councils involved in this, but also looks to government to support the funding, and also some other agencies, such as Unison, for instance, who are not actually ratepayers, but will be beneficiaries of the protective works along the coastline. We are in the throes of engaging with the various government agencies that we need to talk to. As you're all aware, we're probably at the front end of the queue and having developed a strategy and now looking at implementation. So it's very much green pasture work that we're currently doing. It's important for us, we think, to engage with with Minister James Shaw and some of the key people in Wellington before we can finalise what our funding model will look like, and that's the work that's currently underway. So with those words, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? I have still one, it's a micro question. I noted a couple of weekends ago that new wall at Clifton, the extension of that wall, is that working? It looks pretty solid.
Yes, it certainly appears to be working, and I'm sure you're aware of the erosion that's happened along that coastline previously in recent times, and it certainly has arrested that. In fact, that wall's really only just been finished.
I think it.
Yeah, I think it'll work. Yeah, I do.
Other questions? You'll move your own.
I'm happy to move, Chair.
I'll second.
And Rick will second. You've already spoken, so Rick won't need to speak, will he? Except he thought the wall was good too. All those in favour?
Aye.
This report. Against?
A Trumpian wall, that's what we've got, is it? A very good wall.
Report from the Māori Committee. Mr Mohi.
Excellent report.
I'll just take it as read, but there was significant interest in seagrass in the Prongaho estuary, which most of the locals weren't aware of, given by Anna Majestic-Smith. Just to say how special it was, and we had a few arguments about whose fault it was that it was getting more sediments into the estuary. A large interest in the Dartmoor eels, and also considerable interest in the Three Waters consultation process. From the Waira delegates, the Mātiti Marae, the repatriation of graves that are over 100 years old that are falling into the Waira River. The council has gained a lot of respect from the tangata whenua for being part of that repatriation process, which included, it was started off by Joyce Ann. A great interest in the questions and the verbal updates from the CEO and the chair of this council, because it just actually enables the tangata whenua from the four tai whenua to take back that information and to question them. And as the standing down committee at the end of October, I'd just like to say that I hope that the process carries on, because it's a very good way of the tangata whenua being informed straight from the two horses' mouth.
Two horses' mouth.
Two horses' mouth.
Two horses' mouth. Two horses' mouth.
Their tails wagging.
I'd just like to add a little bit to Mike's thing, that presentation, and that is that there will no doubt be, there's a lot of discussion from the treaty claimant groups around their involvement in this committee, and it did come out, Paddy put it on the table, that tangata whenua are going to have to discuss this. figure out how they want to integrate treaty claimant groups in with tai whenua groups. That discussion could take a decade, I guess, and we'll probably still have our Māori committee driven by Te Rata Whenuas and Marae coming up for renewal in October, but they may get it done by then, and we eagerly await those discussions, Mike.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Well,
Yes.
not so much a question, but a statement, Chair, and to you, Mike. I appreciate how much you enjoyed the talk from the two horses' heads. But I must admit, it's the first Māori committee meeting I'd attended for a while, and I really enjoyed the tai whenua updates. So I thought they were an excellent way for the communication to come back our way as well. So much appreciated.
We have a mover?
Seconded.
I'll move.
I'll second.
You'll second. I've already spoken. Rick, do you wish to say anything? All those in favour?
Aye.
Environmental Services Committee. Tom, do you wish to do this as Chair?
Okay, I'll take the paper as pretty much as read, comment on one item in particular. Really all of the agenda items at that meeting were informational. This report then represents, in effect, our double debating of anything that would have required such. But one shortcoming I would note in this report and in the process we have is that this is a pretty shorthand description of what was on the agenda of that committee meeting, and in particular with respect, for example, to number 9, the discussion about the marine environment and discharges into the environment. There was quite a bit of pretty robust discussion around all of that, and including the tabling of some additional reporting and some ingredients of that reporting that we felt, I think, as a council, we wanted to see on a more regular basis. And so part of the problem is that you see this, which is in effect, our last opportunity to deal with the issue, but we haven't seen I have the unconfirmed minutes of the meeting, which provide a little more detail as to what actually was discussed there. But I would say on that point in particular, there was quite a bit of additional input from the councillors in that discussion about treating the marine environment as a receiving environment, looking more comprehensively at the discharges into it, including adding Wairoa and Central Hawke's Bay discharges that wind up in Hawke Bay. There are consenting conditions in all of those situations that could bear closer scrutiny and regular reporting to know whether we are in fact on track with all of those. And so somehow when you look at item 9 in this report, you don't really get any sense of what what embellishment was dealt to the issue and what the heightened, I would say, expectations of the council were with respect to reporting in this area. So I don't know how to, at the next Environment Committee meeting, we will presumably officially adopt the minutes of the meeting. So I'm not quite sure where we appropriately codify some of this additional information that we would like to see. I mean, how does that actually get embedded into the system?
Well, look, I'm wondering whether we can review whether or not, when we've got specific recommendations or actions that are agreed to at our committees, whether we reflect those better in our committee summary reports generally, because we tend to just give a 1 or 2 sentence description of the item, and yet you correctly note that on many committees there are specific actions that arise, which will be picked up in the minutes, of course.
Yeah, they should be reflected.
But we could reflect, well, they are reflected in the minutes.
Yeah.
The question is whether we bring them forward into these committee reports. We'll make these just a bit longer, but there's not a huge number of them typically, and I don't see as a major challenge just to bring those across. I don't know.
Well, Mr. Chair?
Leanne or Joe, you've got any reaction to that?
We can do that and make it also very clear around the purpose of this paper itself as well, which is not perhaps as explicit as it should have been. But we can't, I mean, if you look back at the RPC one, the recommendations were very clear in the paper. We probably need to do a little bit, add a bit of more meat to the bones for this.
Well, I think generally when we have decision items at the committee meetings, they are boiled into a set of recommendations which we vote on.
Yeah.
Those tend to get picked up. Still not with much background, but at least they're picked up.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Here, in this case, we had all information items. All we did was vote to accept reports. At the time, we probably, Neil in this case, or someone would have said, oh, well, that's with the proviso that we'll get X, Y, Z, and that doesn't seem to make it through the system.
Yeah.
Their actions arising almost out of the...
Neil, do you want to comment?
Well, yes, Mr. Chair, just to comment on that, I totally concur with Tom around it, because I would have expected there to have been seen as an action point some of the commentary that we made at the time, and I've actually crafted some wording that hopefully we can go forward on. So it's really the will of council being expressed to staff to say this is the expectation we have around that point. And in that regard, I've said, Leanne's going to put it up on the screen shortly, that a comprehensive report on public wastewater consents is provided to council, and I've said a 6 monthly basis, can be a regular basis. The report to include a checklist of compliance with consent conditions, including science input and assessment from the HBRC executive on strategic elements of public wastewater management. So capturing the respective expectations in a comprehensive report. I just wonder whether we can table that now and consider as a part of the recommendation.
Are you happy with that, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, and I think there was general agreement at the meeting from Liz in particular that, yeah, this more comprehensive and inclusive reporting needed to occur. It just didn't quite get, maybe that's my fault as a chairman, it didn't get quite specified enough at the time, or it didn't get carried through, one or the other, into a formal endorsement by the full council.
Okay, well, we'll just hold that up there. You had some other questions of Tom? Peter and then Rick.
Up to Peter. This is another matter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just hold it up.
It's in relation to the outdoor weaning tool. How is that being made available to growers and people that are burning things on the plains?
Sorry, the burning tool?
The burning tool, yeah.
We're working with the Fruit Growers Association, Apple and Pears, as I understand it, to publicise the existence of the app. The media release went out yesterday, I think, and we'll be using sort of all available channels through the winter to bring to people's attention that it's there.
So this is in fact in the form of an app that they can download and
correct.
Check.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Rick?
I tend to have a different view to this than Tom. I mean, I was at the meeting, and I recall that we went through information item after information item. This is a decision-making entity. We're here to make decisions, and if there's no decisions, well, there's no need to report. Now, on each of these items, I was very happy that this just identified this. Anybody who wants to know more about one of these elements can go back to the original paper. All the paperwork's there. I don't want it sent to me twice. I don't need that. So if it's in the system, it's there, it's okay. I just think we need to look more at the way in which we structure our work and what we're doing. If there's no need to make a decision, well, we don't need to make one.
Are you happy for that to go into the paper?
Oh, I'm happy with that. But I'm just saying, I don't see this as a problem. And we received a lot of information reports. People want to get them out there.
Yeah, we did take this as a slightly more formal request around changing the regularity of our reporting on this area, because we have a standing compliance report at the moment, which is 6 monthly, which captures all the TA Three Waters consents. And we took from this meeting that you want something over and above for wastewater. Liz made the point during the meeting that we do have a 6 monthly report across all of our consenting activity, and we have had separate commentary on the TAs in that. But this is of a slightly grander nature. And on that score, I would slightly recommend that we, well, not slightly, I'd recommend that we drop checklist of and just leave compliance. The only reason for that is that in each and every consent there is 70, 80 consent conditions. You know, you'll go to pages and pages and pages and pages of lists of very large numbers of consent conditions that I don't know that you want a checklist of each and every one, but an overall commentary on compliance with the consent conditions might be more useful.
Well, just to comment on that, if I could, Mr Chair, maybe an exceptions reporting scenario, because I think there are 38 consent conditions as the maximum available on maximum number on those public water consents. But each council's got a schedule, I think between 17 and 38 conditions. Right. So perhaps it could simply be an exceptions or non-compliant reporting basis. But what I'm seeking is a comprehensive understanding about both our monitoring of that and our actions around wastewater consenting.
I think the added aspect of it was that the nature of that discussion was that we wanted a comprehensive picture of what was happening to the marine environment. And the report that we were looking at is a consenting report that goes through anybody and anything that's consented, and fine, that's fine for that purpose. But if over time we're going to be more focused on what's happening in the bay, then this would be an important element of understanding what in fact is happening and who's causing what to happen, and are our conditions being enforced or not. That's why it was broken out as a sort of a separate, looking at it through a different lens, basically, is what we asked for. So understood. This you know.
Okay, Mike?
Yes, just supporting what Councillor Belford's saying. Malcolm Miller presented a paper to the Māori committee, and we asked if he could give us an update to include what happens not only to the marine environment but to the environment with these discharges at the next Māori committee. There was a lot of interest in the actual paper.
Thank you, Chair. Just different tack. Number 2, the sustainable farming presentation. Just a question to the Chief Executive. Obviously the market's doing its thing, etc., but there's implications for this organisation out of that presentation that day on the basis that it'll be driving planting in places where it shouldn't be for a range of reasons that, you know, shouldn't be driving it. I'm just wondering, what are we doing, if anything, to follow up on that presentation? I mean, it's pretty stark reality that it's coming, and I mean, I've circulated a article to councillors today in regard to others' concerns on such things, because it's driving behaviours that are short-term with long-term consequence.
So what we've done is we've expanded the scope of the Right Tree, Right Place project slightly to do comparative agronomic analysis against existing pastoral systems and the different forestry systems that we're studying. We're doing some, we've built into the contract some socio-economic analysis as well, and a Wairoa case study specifically around all of that. So that piece of work, which Scion and some subcontractors to them are sort of leading the work on, is going to come into that report. I did see yesterday a request from Scion to push out our delivery date, which has been 30 June, out to August, just because of the scale of the work, and I'm generally supportive, given all the other things that we've got on between now and then, and our inability to launch into a special consultation around the council's potential investment in commercial forestry between then and the local body elections. So I think we've got time, and we've got obviously the port issues to work through. So that's going to come through a little bit later, but it will give us a really comprehensive picture of the impact of forestry in the Wairua district, and all the different trade-offs and options around different forest systems, whether it be carbon forestry or plantation forestry or continuing current land use.
So is there an opportunity, I mean, Provincial Growth Fund and aspirations around the billion trees, it's doable if the right bits of farmland, I'm preaching to the converted obviously, but a certain percentage went in to offset the on-farm emissions as well as get our billion trees. Is there any appetite, and I understand you do sit on that committee in Wellington, to try and massage this to a place where it's actually a bit more realistic for a range of outcomes, not just the sentence a billion trees?
Look, there is, and interestingly, I think we're seeing the forestry industry starting to worry about its social licence to operate. So not only off the back of the Tolaga Bay event, but also the growing concern about the land use change and implications on rural communities, has seen that group now driving some very specific work around that. What I am seeing from the Ministry for Primary Industries is a desire to see other regions do what we are doing by way of a comprehensive regional analysis, so that there's some good financial modelling and some good mapping, some good evidence to support discussions with landowners. There are some limitations obviously around what we can control between the private market and landowners, and that's going to a conversation which I had yesterday with Te Rākau around the National Environmental Standard on Plantation Forestry, and whether we've got enough regulatory control to ensure that we're not putting forests in the wrong places, and potentially this new environmental national policy statement they're looking at around protection of soil quality. It was principally focused on elite soils, actually whether there should be a broadening of the thinking around that, around how we protect other soils for production into the pastoral landscape as well. So it's on the table for work that's going on right now.
Finn, I'd just like to comment on that too, because I thought that report from Morris was outstanding. I thought it was one of the best reports that I've ever heard since I've been on the Regional Council. And it was very acute, really, because no matter what we think we can do about land use, which we have limited powers, there's no doubt about it that the market is driving in front of us. And all we can do really, and we just can't watch it all happen, but all we can do is to ensure that we educate. So having our right tree, right place thing is going to be really good, because the forestry companies, we can actually take it to them and give them a copy, and hopefully they can at least be conscious of it, and then ensure we, and as James has alluded to, that we have the legislation in place that the forestry is world class, which it's not at the moment, of course. So apart from that, there's not a lot we can do, because the market is just going to drive this thing hard, and we're running to catch up. And we didn't expect it to go this fast, and it's happening in Wairua and Central Hawke's Bay. And I doubt very much where we'll get legislation in place for land use in time, because it's going to happen in the next 5 years. It takes us a long time to do a plan change. So I think everyone's worried about it. If he's right, and at 25.5, forestry prices are at $12,000 a hectare, and beef and lambs at $8,000 a hectare, and that was his numbers he gave us, we're already in trouble, let alone, or challenged, let alone if carbon goes to 26, 27. It's a big thing on all of our minds.
Mr. Chairman, I will move the recommendation as written as number 1, add those words as number 2, and make that the motion on the table.
I'll second.
And Neil will second that. Do you want to speak anymore, Neil?
Yeah, I do want to speak to this, Mr. Chair, because in looking at this report and the items on it, this is essentially whether rubber meets the road for this council. If you look at the headings there, you'll see that this is substantially why we're here, is to deliver these things plus some. I do want to comment that perhaps, I think the time's come though that we put it at the top of the table here. The number one item is climate change and the urgency around that. All of these are steps that we can, if you like, respond to a changing world, but the reality is events are overrunning us, and we've got to run much faster than even we have before, even this body of work represents. And the evidence is just becoming overwhelming. There's an avalanche of evidence coming through around global warming, about climate change, and we are in the midst of it. The people to follow us, our descendants, the next generation, will be facing a very, very substantially changed world, and we have contributed majorly to the dilemma that they and crises that they will face. So it's our job to do something about that. I'd like to see a much more focused, particularly in the next year, focused on what we are doing by way of mitigating climate change, perhaps measuring our carbon footprint, and then doing a top to bottom across the organisation, if you like, response to that urgency. And just to give you one example, which needs to be debated, is that at any one moment in the world, there are 200,000 aircraft in the air discharging enormous amounts of carbon directly into, without any filtration whatsoever, generating an enormous amount of problem for the environment. But here in Hawke's Bay, we're quietly getting on and promoting international air travel. We spend $1.5 million on air travel each year, or travel, which includes by plane to our province. So we're needing to examine every area of expenditure that we are promoting, and to ask the question, is this the right thing to do by way of mitigating climate change and carbon outputs? Finally, Mr. Chair, I just want to refer to our response to the marine environment and the need to be double down on our observation of it. So we need to turn those compliance reporting arrangements we've got into place into a much more comprehensive, much more focused, strategic overview of how and when we are dealing with discharges into the sensitive environment. I feel as though we need to introduce elements of strategy into it. So what are we doing about the wastewater discharges by our councils? What can we do? What investments must be made, and what influence can we have over local authorities and our other major players? In addition to local authorities, obviously we need to talk to the big industries to make sure that they too are responding to the crisis we have in our waterways and our ocean. So that's the message I'm hoping that staff pick up on. We must do more in that regard to monitor and consult, advise, influence is where I'm coming from on that particular action point.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers, Mike?
Just in terms of the Ngāruaroro, last week, Anzac Day, I was with the Minister flying over the area with the headwaters of the Ngāruaroro. Ngāwhenarahui the day before just signed off the fourth kawanata for the area, includes 38,000 hectares. And the Minister was absolutely taken back by the pristine beauty of that area. She'd seen photos of it, but it was the first time she'd actually been up there, so it sort of gave her a real idea of what pristine water looks like.
Was she influenced that we're looking after it okay, or did she think
she had problems with a slideshow the day before where it showed your photo up there, unshaven as you were.
Which minister was that, Mike?
Minister Sage.
Okay.
Do we have any more speakers, or do we can have we've got a mover and a second up?
I actually have a speech now about Christmas Day.
It's enough from you. All those in favour of accepting the report with this amendment? All those against? Carried. Righto, we have two minor items, and I'm trying to find them. I wrote them down, but I'm missing them.
Drinking water joint committee.
Drinking water. Who was that? Paul.
Yep, Chair, there was a meeting of the Hawke's Bay Drinking Water Governance Joint Committee held on the 11th of April. Firstly, I'm a little bit surprised that we don't get a report back to this council, this committee on those particular subcommittees. It's much like the Coastal Hazards Committee in terms of its nature, I think. Just one to ponder on.
The joint committee.
We get reports on that.
Yeah, we have had.
We have it.
Have we?
Yeah.
Anyway, no discussion.
We'll follow that up.
Yep, okay. The three main topics we discussed, one was the three waters review, I think, which everyone's reasonably familiar with. The other one was around the tank plane change, and especially around the development of source protection zones, which was of particular interest. There was also an update on the CHP water issues, and given that Bill Stevenson and Catherine Hobbs-Turner had actually presented to this council, or this committee, back in July, I thought it was pertinent just to go through a summary of the results, because one of the things we asked for there was a survey of the residents of Ronga and Tiko. There were 150 households in the survey. 40% of those responded, so that was 60 households. 80% of those had a bore as a primary source of drinking water, which is 52, and of those 52, 60% were affected by water issues, water supply issues. So you're talking about 31 out of the 60 who responded being affected. So you can look at about half the households down there have got an issue. So that's around 75. I spoke to Mr. Stevenson yesterday because I wanted to try and get a handle on the financial implications of that for the residents down there, and it would seem that the number is somewhere between $500,000 and $750,000 if you take the 21 households that he's already gone through and surveyed and got all the costings for, which I thought sort of, the whole point of the survey was to give us an idea of the size and scale of the problem, and that to me is about it. But one of the other comments, so that's a report. But James, one of the things Bill had said to me, and he tried to get hold of you and have discussions with you a couple of times, and I just wondered if we could actually facilitate that at some stage in the near future. He'd be really appreciative of that.
Thank you, Paul. Neil, you've already done your air travel. Do you want to do it again?
I'd love to do it again, but I just wanted to go into Christmas and the importance of the 25th of December.
We do have an organisation of double debating, but let's go.
double in 15 minutes.
Mr. Chair, I wonder whether there's several reports appeared in the newspapers of late, or media of late, around the impacts of air travel in particular, but I'm asking if staff can come back at some point, perhaps a report to the Environment Committee around our carbon footprint as an organisation around travel in general, including road and air travel, but also generally to bring back, given that we're an evidence-based organisation, some reporting as to what the impacts around travel and air travel are, and how we might measure that from our organisation's output.
Does that count personal travel?
Very good.
Does that count councillors' other personal?
I think so too. If
we don't hold that information, Chair.
Thank you.
We intend to gather it.
Thank you, Neil. Right. Okay, so that is the end of our formal meeting, everybody. Thank you very much. Now we need someone to take us out of... what's that?
Yes, I thought Neil had, at the end of that, a very valid point.
What's that? Right.
About if we're going to be an entity which is about the environment and carbon neutrality and so on, we then have to take a stand on this. And one of the issues that he's raised before, and I think we should have a wider debate on, if that's the case, why do we fund tourism, which is all about...
I don't recall you having this on the minor items.
I know. I'm saying I'm agreeing with it.
I'll grant him leave to...
Thank you, Councillor, for your additional...
And then there are cruise ships. We can move on to cruise ships.
I'll move.
Movement to Public excluded. Second it. Thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
And everyone's here, aren't they? So we just turn the cameras off. Is that what we do?
Yeah.
Yes.